Welcome to AlertFind's webinar series. We will be taking questions at the end of the presentation, but please feel free to use the chat feature to ask any questions that you have. And anything that we can't answer, by the end of the hour, we will do a follow-up on AlertFind's blog. Please make sure that your speakers are muted to preserve the audio quality, and a recording of today's webinar will be emailed out to all of the attendees. You can also join the conversation on Twitter by using the hashtag planactrecover. Okay, let's get started. I am so excited to introduce you all to our guest today. His name is Bob Clark. Bob is a fellow of the Institute of Business Continuity Management, a fellow of the British Computer Society, and a member of the Security Institute. He spent more than 40 years in the business continuity field and has expertise in all aspects of the life cycle, developed during his 15 years at IBM and 11 years at Fujitsu. He is a BCI approved trainer and runs BCI licensed training courses. He's also written 4 business continuity related books. The first of these books, In Hindsight, a compendium of business continuity case studies, reached the #1 spot on Amazon's bestseller list. And my name is Danielle Ricci. I'm the marketing team leader for AlertFind. AlertFind is an emergency notification system that businesses, hospitals, and schools can use to send out multi-channel alerts to employees and students in the event of an active shooter, natural disaster, or other emergency. Today, I will be talking to Bob about how to create a business impact analysis for your organization that lets you establish exactly how long you have to recover before you risk serious damage or even bankruptcy. Welcome, Bob. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Danielle.
Great. So let's just jump right in. Could you start by explaining what business impact analysis is and how it fits into the business continuity management process?
Yeah, certainly. If I just take a step back first, business continuity management has a life cycle which is a holistic process. That's to say, you can't pick and choose. You need to go through the entire cycle to make it effective. It enables organizations to continue to operate or to recover quickly from some kind of serious incident that they may experience. It could be caused from any one of a number of things: natural disasters, IT failures, cyber attacks, the head office burns down, terrorism. Yeah, the list goes on. As far as the business impact analysis is concerned, it's a vital part of the whole process. In fact, it's the cornerstone. And it enables organizations to understand what's actually important and what is not important to their organization. One question I will often ask chief executives or senior people in organizations is, how long do you actually have after disaster before your company goes out of business? And it's surprising how many of them don't actually know. But if they've actually been through the business impact analysis process, then they'll have the answer to that question along with a lot of other vital bits of information that they need. And it's using this that actually enables us to define the business continuity plan and the IT disaster recovery plan, which a lot of people don't realize, to make sure that they are fit for purpose. The sort of information we're looking to get out of that, first of all, is what we call the maximum tolerable period of disruption for each of your products or services, etc. In other words, how long can you go before the company is in serious jeopardy if you have been unable to recover the operation? We're looking for information such as our recovery time objectives, which is a practical version in terms of what aspect or what part of the maximum tolerable period of disruption are we actually going to allocate to recover. The shorter the recovery time, the more expensive the solution will be. I've yet to find a situation where a shorter time has actually reduced the cost. It doesn't seem to work like that. But equally, you could find yourself in a situation where you've designed some kind of a recovery and found you've over-engineered it. So you're actually paying more than you need to recover the operation. Business impact analysis also tells us what we call a recovery point objective, and that's all about data. How much data can you actually afford to lose? Now, the answer may be none. If you're in a bank, the answer is more likely to be none. Other organizations may say, well, we can lose a couple of hours or maybe a day, or we can recreate the data or whatever. But it's important that you know, because that helps you define your data management strategy. Again, that might be a Rolls-Royce solution, which is going to be expensive, or it might be a comparatively inexpensive solution. But without doing your business impact analysis, you don't know whether you've got that right. So hopefully that will answer the question on that one, Danielle.
Yes, and you mentioned that when you ask business leaders how long they have to recover, that many of them don't know. In your experience, what percentage of companies have completed a business risk impact analysis?
Just to make the distinction, a business impact analysis and a risk assessment or a threat analysis, they're not quite the same thing. But with the business impact analysis, if an organization is regulated, and the best example of that is the financial sector, although there are others, then I would have expected them to have a fairly mature business continuity program, and business impact analysis would be an integral part of that. But once you get outside of regulated industries, then it's very difficult to actually put a figure on it to say that it's 10% or it's 30% or whatever that's actually done it. I'm usually asked to go and assist organizations because maybe they haven't done it, or maybe they've done it and they're not sure if they've done it right. So I tend not to necessarily be called into an organization that is feeling comfortable because they feel they've done a good job of their business impact analysis. So that's a difficult one to quantify.
And in your opinion, what's stopping people from doing these analyses? Do they not see the value, or do they lack the internal expertise?
It can be both. One situation I can think of is an organization may decide we need to invest in business continuity. And the first thing they may decide to do is decide who they're going to appoint as the business continuity manager. It's often the IT manager. Now that tells me that they're living in the past, because we've long since got over the days when we used to think business continuity is just a computer problem. It's not. It used to be 30, 40 years ago, but business continuity has evolved since then, and we're finding ourselves in the situation now where we appreciate that it's not just about IT, it's about every aspect of the business. So that's a problem of understanding. A lot of organizations may say to someone, we need a business continuity plan, and someone will put a plan together, but without the benefit of understanding where the priorities are in the organization. What must they fix within 2 days, and what can they afford to leave for 2 weeks, 2 months, or whatever? What are the things that you depend upon? What's the underpinning infrastructure, I would call it? And that can be, again, IT, that can be buildings, that can be people, that can be suppliers. And of course, it's invariably data. So putting the whole jigsaw together is all done in the business impact analysis. And if you've not done that, then you don't have the picture to work with to put the rest of the jigsaw on the table in one piece.
Great. So how would you suggest that companies get started with the process?
There's a couple of ways that they can look at that. Firstly, they can undertake, I think, a program of training. But what I've also found is that when I've trained organizations, they say, that's fantastic, now we understand, but what do we do next? So it doesn't necessarily give them all the answers that they want. It certainly make them more aware of the things they need to cover. They can employ someone who is a business continuity expert, but not every company has the budget to do that. Or they can look to the services of a consultant to come in and work with them. Now, here's an important thing. I can go into a company and I can produce a business continuity plan for them. But if they're not working with me, then that's my plan. It's not theirs, and they won't have any sense of ownership. So what is important is that I work with the organization to facilitate, to mentor, to direct, to point them in the right direction when they've gone off track, etc. And that tends to work fairly quickly for most organizations because they're learning as they go, rather than doing a training program and maybe a month, 6 weeks downstream, they're thinking, so what did the instructor say about that? What do we have to do about that? And what do we have to avoid here? It's ongoing. And in a sense, I suppose it's a little bit like a hands-on, just-in-time program for training as you need to actually understand what's next. So those, in my view, are the three ways you can go about it. If you've got the budget, then certainly look to employ someone on a permanent basis who's got business continuity expertise. Otherwise, as I say, you need to look at what's the best way for you. And sometimes actually using a consultant can be cheaper than doing it yourself, because you're not making the mistakes that you may otherwise make if you're sort of feeling your way as you go.
And take me through the process of how you would work with a company. You know, how do you actually go about putting together a business impact analysis?
Well, I've worked in a variety of different industries, and I'm quite comfortable whether I'm going into one that I've worked with before or whether I haven't. And the reason is I look at it this way. My expertise is in the business continuity management process. The company should know their business, whatever it happens to be, whether it's drilling for oil, whether it's the financial sector, whether it's someone in retail, it doesn't matter. That's their business. They should know it. And I see my job as facilitating, extracting the information from them in such a way as you're not leading the witness as such, but you are asking the appropriate questions at the appropriate times to actually make them think about their business. Now, one of the issues that you can have, and in fact, if I can go off on a slight tangent, I want to explain about an experience I had with one client. I was leading a team of 5 or 6, I think it was, other consultants going into a very large organization in the UK. And they'd done a business continuity program, they told us. They'd done a business impact analysis, and they just wanted a health check, as they call it. They wanted some reassurance that everything was okay. But they told us on arrival that we have 220 mission critical business processes. And I must admit, I thought, what? Even though it was a big organization, and we looked in this, we worked through it with the business, and that 220, I think we got down to about 19 or 20, something like that. And this can often happen where people in the business are very protective of their particular part of the business. My bit of business is more important than yours, so therefore I should be higher up the ranking than yours. And really, that does the business overall no good at all. And you need to take a step back and say, okay, let us look at this objectively and not get tangled up in emotions in terms of what is and what isn't more important. And the objectiveness of the process should enable people to say, well, actually, that's the most important product, or that's the most important service. And we need to recover that first and understand it from that perspective.
Great. That was a fantastic real world example. What other mistakes do you see companies making in this process?
Not following the process that's being defined. Now, business continuity management came of age in 2012 when the international standard ISO 22301 was launched. And the Business Continuity Institute has got what it calls a good practice guideline. And if you follow the standard, if you follow the guideline, it tells you step by step what you need to do. But if you get people, going back to my original comment about that the whole process is holistic, then if you cherry pick, you're going to miss bits out. And you just need to take it through step by step and understand what it is that you've got to do. What are the deliverables from each of these exercises? Why is each deliverable important? How are you going to use it? And if you approach it in that way, it's going to reduce the number of areas where you're going to trip up and come up with what looks like a fantastic business impact analysis, but in reality, it's not going to work.
Great.
And it doesn't matter at that point in time how much effort you put in putting together a plan, whether it's for business continuity or IT disaster recovery. If the BIA is wrong, those plans will be wrong.
So business impact analysis could be looked upon as the cornerstone of the BCM process, but does it also influence the IT side of the business with regard to IT disaster recovery?
Yes to both questions there. As far as the IT side is concerned, if I give you an example that the head office of an organization burns down, and within that building is their data center, that implies they need to find somewhere for the staff to relocate to, and they need some kind of disaster recovery plan in place to have a backup data center. Now, there are various options there. They could have a secondary site somewhere. They could use the cloud. They could outsource to another organization, etc. That's just detail. What is important that both business and IT know how long they have got before they've got to have that recovery finished. And this comes back to your recovery time objectives that I mentioned earlier. And I've also seen situations where businesses can say, we can recover IT in 2 hours. You know, that's fantastic, great. And then the business is saying, but we really don't need to be up and running again for 2 days. So you've got a mismatch there in terms of what one is doing compared with what the other's doing. And in that particular instance, I would suggest, in fact, I told the company, you have over-engineered your IT disaster recovery and you're paying a lot more than you need to. So it's not a case of doing it as quickly as possible. You may not need to do it ultra quickly like that. There are some companies that may have weeks in which to recover. And if you're in the life and death scenario, if you're working in an accident emergency situation in hospitals, you know, arguably some people may say we're measuring things in minutes in terms of recovery. So it's very, very much governed by the type of business you're in and the products and the services that you're offering your clients and how quickly they are going to react. I don't know how many of the people on the webinar will be familiar with Northern Rock. It was a bank in the UK. And someone put out something in the media about the bank was in trouble. And it caused a run on the bank. It was the first run on a bank in the UK for 150 years. Now, what actually occurred in this instance is that as a rule of thumb in the UK, if you are a retail bank and you cannot service your clients, you can't allow them to get their money out or put money in or whatever, within a week, you'll probably be out of business. So that's how quickly retail banking is working. There will be variations, of course. Some may be shorter, some may be longer. But it actually enables the business to focus and say, if we don't get this fixed by this time tomorrow or by Monday of next week, then we're all looking for new jobs. And that is something which it's not just the company, it's obviously every employee in the company. They're a stakeholder in this. And they need to be comfortable that the organization is looking after their interests as well as the corporate interests. And that message doesn't always come across.
I think that stakeholder idea is really interesting. I imagine that it's kind of like pulling teeth to get people involved in an organization to, help put together a business impact analysis. How do you convince them that they are stakeholders and that this, as much as we all believe that disasters will never happen, how do you bring them in and make them feel like this is actually an important process for the business to go through for its longevity?
Well, you're right in terms of there are people out there that say, oh, I haven't got time to do this. I'm too busy, without necessarily appreciating the bigger picture, what it's all about. The best way I found around this is if you've got an organization that takes annual appraisals seriously and people are judged upon measurable objectives, if you make business continuity one of their objectives and there are financial incentives attached, it tends to focus the mind a little more closely than perhaps if they hadn't. But I found myself in the situation where I've had individuals that I've had to sit down and talk to and explain, look, this is not about the company, this is about your job. And if the company cannot do this or the company cannot achieve that, it could be your neck that's on the line, not because you didn't help, but because you could be looking for another job, because your job disappears. Worst case scenario, I would go back to my sponsor, whoever he or she may be, and generally speaking, that would be someone at board level, and saying, look, I've got someone's blocking. Can you fix it? And worst case scenario, it usually works, but I try and avoid that if at all necessary. As far as the objectives and the annual appraisals are concerned, that's a seed I would sow very early in the process, and it tends to work.
And when companies are putting together a business impact analysis, what types of risks do they most often overlook?
In what context there, Danielle? I can talk about risks as a separate topic. You're thinking risks within business impact analysis itself in terms of they get rubbish out, so to speak?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. It's largely due to a failure to follow the process. There are a number of fundamental questions that you should be asking, probably too many to quote in here, but it's probably a subject for a blog at some future stage, whereby when you've asked this question, you need to explore this, you need to look at that. And it's all about the method as well, because in some organizations, you'll get everyone in the whole business sat around the table trying to sort out the business impact analysis. That's not going to work because you're trying to do it by committee almost. And I found the best way to do it, although not every organization likes it, the best way to do it is on a one-to-one basis. So if I'm responsible for producing the consolidated BIA at the end of the day, I'm sitting down with everyone nominated within the business and asking about their part of the business. Now, I would hope to be able to give them a little bit of training before, so they've got an overview in terms of what we're doing, why we're doing it. And these are the sort of questions I'm going to be asking so they can prepare their thoughts and their input. But if you do it on a one-to-one basis, it can be far more effective than the committee or even a questionnaire. Because if you give a questionnaire to all the key people, there may be things which are, shall we say, misinterpreted. Oh, I thought you meant this. And that little bit of interpretation or misinterpretation could make the difference as to whether you get the right answer for a very important question or the wrong answer. So that's the largest risk I see to the BIA, apart from one other I will throw in there, is if there is no ownership at a senior level of the whole program. And I've also seen the situations where it hasn't been delegated to someone lower down in the organization, it has been abdicated. And I've seen situations where there's the business continuity manager, whoever he or she may be, they're trying to get this program put in place, they need some help, but they're getting no support from above. And support could also mean little or no budget. And that can kill it like any other program that you might be trying to run. So that's not specifically a business continuity type of problem, but it will certainly have a detrimental effect on it.
And let's pivot back to the other meaning of risks that that caused the confusion at the beginning of that last question. In this case, we mean like threats to an organization. Are there any that do pose a big risk to a company that people are just not accounting for when they're planning?
Well, this is another question I tend to try and ask the CEO if I get to meet them. What keeps you awake at night of a business nature, I should hasten to add? that is a threat to the organization. And in the same way as if I ask them, what do you consider a crisis to be? I might get 10 different answers from 10 different CEOs, but it gives me some idea as to where their thinking is going. And it might be, I'm really worried about cyber threats, and I'm really concerned about my supply chain, or whatever it happens to be. The number of threats, I wouldn't even like to try and put a number on it, but there are many. And if one organization sits down and does a threat analysis and comes up with a risk assessment, you will probably find it is unique in one way or another. Very much a case of one size does not fit all. And every organization should understand what are the risks that are, shall we say, of a high threat to the organization. What are things you really don't need to worry about? There's no point, if something is very low risk from a point of view of the potential impact or the probability of it happening, don't waste your time on it. But if on the other hand there is something which, if it happened, that's really going to be nasty, and the probability of it happening, it could be happening anytime in the next 6 months, then that is something you will probably want to focus on. And it's a case of work through all the threats that you know of. Well, let me take a step back, please, if I may, Danielle. There may be people in the organization, and in fact in the webinar audience, that are saying, so what's the difference between a threat and a risk? There is a difference. Some people tend to use the words interchangeably, which is not correct. If I said to you, it's going to rain today, that's a threat. Now, if I said to you, there is a 70% chance that it's going to rain today, and the weather forecast this morning on television said we could expect as much as 10 inches or however many centimeters that happens to be, that's a risk. And the difference is, in the second example I've given you there, I've introduced probability, and I've also introduced impact. The probability was 70%, and the impact was 10 inches of rain. So when you think of a threat, what is the threat of a cyber attack happening? At that point in time, that's just a threat. But when you actually say, we've got a 95% chance of being hit by a cyber attack next year, and the likely consequence of that, or the impact, is going to be we're going to lose all our data, or we're going to be compromised, or all our customer data is going to be spread all over the internet, etc., you are then introducing a risk factor to it. So every organization should go through all the threats that they can see that they might be concerned about, and then translate those through a risk assessment process to say, these are the ones we're really worried about, and these are the ones that we can park for the time being because they're not causing us any grief. That, I think, is the best way to approach it. And it can be natural disasters, it can be man-made disasters. We're seeing, sadly, an increase in terrorism across the world. That's clearly a threat. In London, certainly that's been a major threat for many years. I think a lot of people think that terrorism is a relatively new phenomena, but it's not. It's been around for centuries, and it's just something that is becoming more intense, and it's something that we within business organizations need to come to grips with. Cyber threat is another. 20 years ago, cyber threat was virtually unknown. In fact, I think it was around about 1982, 1983 when the film War Games came out, where you had the young boy hacking into NORAD. And that put the cyber threat on the map for the first time. And it's only since then that people have begun to appreciate that, wow, this is nasty, this is big. And just to finish on that particular point, if I may, before we go on to the next question, what a lot of people don't realize is that every day there's approximately 300,000 new threats into cyberspace. 300,000.
That is staggering. Yeah, that's enormous.
So if any security, information security officers, etc., that say, oh, it's not a problem, I think they need to have another look at that one.
And how frequently should a company undertake a business impact analysis? And are there any triggering events that should, prompt them to update it?
There are two answers to that question. The first one is, under normal circumstances, international standards would dictate that you review your business impact analysis every 12 months, at least every 12 months. I've seen companies that have had business impact analysis that have got so much dust on them, you can't even see the date. It was so long ago. And in terms of its validity and currency, it's lost it. The other driver, if you like, is if you're within an organization that's undergone some serious change. Now, that could be a merger, acquisition, it could be some kind of internal reorganization. You may have introduced new products or services. You might have even discontinued products or services. Then it's a good time to actually look at your business impact analysis and say, so what's changed? Does that affect our business continuity program? And the answer may be yes, it may be no. And if the answer is no, clearly that's it. You probably don't need to do anything to the business continuity plan or the disaster recovery plan. But if the answer is, well, hang on, this is quite big, what's happened here, I think we need to go through the process of reevaluating the plans as well. But you put your business impact analysis on file, and each year, or whenever there's one of these major changes occurring, you compare the new business impact analysis with the old. And if the answer is nothing's changed, then fine, nothing's changed. But if something has changed, then go about making whatever appropriate modifications are necessary.
Great. And let's talk for a second about the importance of communications. What do companies need to be thinking about when it comes to communicating with employees and stakeholders or others after a disaster?
Into crisis management. Well, first of all, an organization would need a crisis management communication plan. And it will need to identify who those stakeholders are. Well, some of those will be internal, employees, etc. Others will be, well, could be your bank manager, your insurer, your customers, the press, etc. There'll be a whole list of individuals and organizations that you will need to make contact with. And having identified what, or rather who fits into which of those two categories, internal and external, then you're in the situation saying, okay, so what are we likely to be telling these people? What sort of messages will we be giving them? And how are we actually going to communicate those messages? If you're in the situation where, and I hope most of the organizations that are represented on this webinar today are in the position of using social media for crisis management, then that is one of the channels that they will use. They may choose to use telephone, they may choose to use text, mobile texting, they may use email, they may put together a video, put it on a CD and post it out to whoever needs to receive it. They may put something on the company website and so on. There's various ways of communicating. And social media has become a very important method of doing that. And in fact, it's entirely possible that the crisis that you're facing was caused by social media in the first place. It's something which, I'm just trying to think of an example. I'm sure a lot of people on the webinar today would have seen the videos of Dr. Dow being dragged off United Airlines flight earlier this year. Oh, sorry, it was last year. Sorry, we're now in 2018. In full view of social media. Now, that flight took a couple of hours. By the time it had landed, that post on, or various posts on social media sites had gone viral. So here we saw United Airlines dragging this individual off the plane. Why? Because they wanted to free up places for their own staff who they wanted to transfer from one place to another. And that created a massive problem for them. Now, they really, really shot themselves in the foot. So it can be something of your making. It can be a crisis that's caused by someone that's hacked into your site. Burger King, not so very long ago, found that their site had been hacked and their logo had been changed to McDonald's. And someone had put on the site, Burger King were now owned by McDonald's, which was not true. And later we had another situation where McDonald's website was hacked and there were derogatory marks being made about Donald Trump. And that upset Donald Trump supporters, etc. And the whole thing again went viral. So you can be a victim, but you can still find yourself in a crisis. And that certainly happened with both Burger King and McDonald's respectively. And hardly a day goes past without something is in the mainstream news, by which I mean various popular news channels or shall we say credible news outlets, that you think, wow. And I think, as I mentioned to you a few days ago, I've not long finished a book about crisis management and social media. So a lot of these things are fresh in my mind, having sort of written the book. And I got to the point where every day something new would come up. And I think I've got to stop. I can't keep including these things in. So people need to be ready. Organizations need to be equipped to say social media, yeah, it can be our best friend, but it could also be our nemesis.
Great.
I went off on a bit of a tangent there. Sorry. Didn't
No,
answer
but
your question.
I think that it gave a lot of real world texture to these kind of scenarios, because you can think about it in the abstract, but that kind of, it just feels like it comes out of left field. What happens if the logo on our website changes? I think companies should really be thinking about, all of these possibilities. I just want to, before we open the floor for questions, I want to ask you if there's anything else that you'd like to add to help companies create a usable business impact analysis.
I think the first thing that organizations need to establish is, what is the appetite? Is this just a whim that maybe one director came into work with one day, we need to do this, but their heart and soul is not really in it? You generally find out if that's the case when there is a budget. But that said, a lot of people say, oh, we've got to spend money on this. Don't like the sound of that. But equally, if you do it properly, business continuity management should be cost neutral. In the problems it resolves you, or it helps you resolve, at a much lesser cost, and the time that impacts will actually take to fix, etc., and it does make a difference, believe you me, then you should find it's cost neutral. The Chartered Management Institute conducted a survey amongst, I think it was about 500 fairly large corporate companies a year or so back, and something in the region, I'm quoting off the top of my head now, I think it's something in the region of 81% of those companies said, yeah, it's cost neutral. We can really see that what we paid and what we're getting, it was worth it. So that's something which a lot of organizations may need to factor in, that if we do this and do this properly, we need to be looking to actually justify it from a cost benefit perspective, and that should help them go down that route.
Great, that's great.
I would also suggest that anyone that is looking to go down this route takes a look at the standards that are there. I'm not that familiar with standards in the US as I am within Europe. So obviously ISO 22301 is the international standard. Equally, the Business Continuity Institute's Good Practice Guidelines. And there's a new version just coming out, which is the 2018 version. So it's worth taking a look at to see what is in there, because it's a step-by-step guide through the entire process, not just business impact analysis, and it breaks it down into manageable chunks. It's like the old saying, how do we hello?
Apologies for the global mute there. We had some noise with the keyboard typing, so I globally muted. Apologies for the delay there. Go ahead, Rob.
Okay, yeah. No, I finished what I was saying. I just, everything seemed to die, so I wondered if I'd dropped out somehow. So is Danielle still with us?
She should be, yes. There you go.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thanks so much, Bob, for that great advice. We are almost at the end of the presentation, so I wanted to open the floor for questions. If anyone from the audience has a question, please add them to the chat window. And we actually have already had one come in. Bob, is there a sample BIA available?
There are a number available on the internet. I wouldn't like to recommend one off the top of my head. I do have a sample here, which I would have to, shall we say, redact some of the information, like who the company is and what have you, that I can potentially make available later downstream for people that are interested in following that through.
Great.
But one of the things it's a good point I didn't mention before, anyone going through the learning process of business impact analysis, it's worth, in addition to just reading as much as you can, if you can get training, great, even better. But if you read, for example, the good practice guidelines that I mentioned, find as many BIAs on the internet as you can and just do a comparison as part of your learning process. And you may find that that helps tremendously. But in the meantime, yes, I can put one together in the next few days to make available.
That's fantastic advice. And thanks so much for the offer to make a sample available. As soon as we have that, we will we'll make it available, I think probably through the blog, or we'll get the word out to everyone who's here on the call today. I think that may be it for questions.
Someone is asking the name of my up-and-coming book.
Oh, fantastic.
Mary.
I would also like to know that. I'm sure we're all excited to read it.
Yes, the actual title is Crisis Management. Is social media its best friend or worst enemy? I can see other questions, but they're some reason they're what are your thoughts? The actual window I've got here for the questions is so narrow I can't see the whole questions.
Sure, I can read that for you.
Someone's asking.
The next question.
Yeah,
how do you plan for or test cloud solutions, especially as more companies become more dependent on cloud services, example in the cloud, Box, etc.?
What I would say to organizations saying, well, the cloud is the answer, I would ask them, so what was the original question? Cloud is a solution looking for a problem. Now, it might be the right solution for your organization. And what we're talking about as far as cloud is concerned, a lot of people think it's magical, it's mysterious, but we're just talking about outsourcing to a data center or data centers. In some cases, it's multiple. There's a whole series of questions. Oh, crikey, again. I'm thinking aloud here, and this is to Danielle and to the other guys back at base, is I could actually do a whole seminar on this, a whole webinar. I've got a 2-day course on IT disaster recovery and creating a plan. And the question that I'm being asked, I could spend quite some time on, because it's always one of these, it depends. And it depends on this, it depends on that, and so on. But you really need to understand what your requirement is and then match it to say, is cloud the right solution? And it may well be. But what we're seeing with cloud is a lot of people, a lot of organizations migrating to the cloud because they think it's a panacea. It's not. Cloud companies do go bust. And I can tell you, if you're in the unfortunate situation of being a client of a cloud organization that goes to the wall, it can get very messy. So there's a whole host of things that you need to factor in here to actually consider how should we be addressing the issue of cloud. It's a very, very good question, and you're right to ask it. I just feel I can't do it justice in the time that we've got left. So I'm going to throw that one back to you guys.
Great. And I am so excited to throw down with you on that somewhere down the road, because I do think that that's a very interesting question that we should probably, take a good hour to answer. And we do have another question. Hopefully it's, not another hour-long question, but yes. How many core questions would you recommend the BIA consist of? Is there a limit to the number of questions you recommend?
That would be driven by the business, but you're going to be looking at things like, in the event that this particular product or this particular service is not available for a period of time, at that point it's unspecified, what is it going to cost the company? And money tends to focus the mind. And if you're in the situation of saying, well, actually, it's only going to lose us a few $1,000 or whatever, but that one over there, that's going to lose us hundreds of thousands of bucks for every hour that the service isn't available. And it's drilling down from there to understand precisely what the nature of the product or the service. And one other thing I should add there, it's also back office processes and procedures that organizations will forget. I'm sure everyone who works for an employer thinks, oh yeah, next Friday, that's payday, or whatever day it happens to be. But if you have a disaster and the payroll process is not one that has been accommodated within business continuity, you could end up not getting paid. So it's not just your client facing, it's also back office. There may be legislation that says you must report on this particular part of your business on this date, year-end reporting, tax reporting, etc. These are things which authorities can sometimes be rather unforgiving if you miss the date, even though you may say, well, mitigating circumstances, we were hit by a hurricane at the same time there was a massive cyber attack going on or something like that. So it's something which, again, it's difficult to answer. When I actually put the sample BIA out there in the next few days, then I would hope that's going to answer your question. My contact details are on the page in front of you. If it doesn't, come back to me and let me know.
Great, and that's a good segue to letting everyone know that I think that that's probably all that we have time for today. But we we very sincerely want to thank you, Bob. You've been an excellent expert here on this webinar.
My pleasure.
Yeah, sharing all of your expertise, and Bob's contact information is here on this presentation deck, which we will be emailing out to everyone along with a recording of the webinar. So we'll be following up on any additional questions in the next few days on the blog. Hopefully we will have that sample available for everyone as well. And just again, thank you so much, Bob. You're a wealth of expertise, and we are so excited to be working with you.
Thank you very much, Danielle.
Great.
I look forward to working with you again.
Fantastic.
If you'd like more expert advice from Bob on how to take your business continuity planning to the next level, check out our BC assessment tool. This interactive tool takes you through 10 questions to evaluate the strength of your business continuity plan. And you can find it in the resources section of alertfind.com. We'll also be sending a link to the tool out in an email follow-up tomorrow, along with a recording of today's presentation. AlertFind is an emergency notification system for BC professionals. You can see it in action by scheduling a demo through alertfind.com. Just hit the schedule a demo button. If you'd like to get in touch with Bob, his contact information is there on the right side of your screen. And if you'd like to get in touch with me, you can contact me through the Contact Us page on alertfind.com or email me. Thanks again, everyone, for joining us today, and a special thank you to Bob for sharing all of his wisdom with us. Thanks.